I welcome everybody to our conversations with our West Coast crew, people from Los Angeles. We're trying to get some real time information on what is going on with the crisis in our business. We want to be the feedback loop for our industry. Just to let you know, I'm David Adler, the chairman and founder of BizBash, and we want to do everything we can to engage our community. This may not be the typical Zoom conversation that you've seen, because we're going to treat it more like how we operate more of a podcast environment. So we're trying to get freewheeling information from everybody. Before we start, I'm going to turn it over to Claire Hoffman, who is our editor on the West Coast, our Los Angeles bureau chief, to give us a little insight on what we're going to be seeing and doing today.
Yeah, thanks, David. So we really want to use this chance to get into the nitty-gritty of issues everyone is dealing with right now. We know the situation is changing so rapidly, and it's changing depending on your contract, your location, kind of what area of the events industry you're in. So hopefully you all tuned in last week. We spoke to a New York-based team, and today we're lucky to have a West Coast-based team. We have people from Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Portland. So we're really getting a whole stretch of people. And before I get into introducing everybody, I want to say to all of our listeners and viewers, if there are any pressing topics you think we're missing through this, please go in the Q&A tab on the right side of the page. You can click Q&A and ask your question by using the plus sign. It's in the bottom right corner. So we'll have 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So make sure to ask what you want to learn about. So I want to start by introducing our group today, and then we're going to give them all a chance to chat a bit. We have Dominic Venn-Lever, who is the general manager for Southern California for Blueprint Studios. We have Rolando Espinoza, creative director for Champagne Creative Group and Champagne Experiential Studios based in Las Vegas. Wayne Fernandez is the owner and general manager of Magic Box Events at the Reef in downtown LA. And finally, we have Vinnie Balistreri, the head of marketing for Glisser. They're the ones actually powering this broadcast today, and Vinnie is based in Portland. So we have a really diverse group here from throughout the West Coast and from kind of 4 different industries under the events umbrella. So we'd love to just kind of have you guys talk for a few minutes. Let us know. Go ahead.
Let me jump in. What we want to do is we want to, first of all, deal with this on a human level. You know, the interesting thing about the event industry is that we're about these human connections. Our industry has more heart than almost any other industry, if I do say so myself. And we want to hear from each person on the call what is going on in their worlds, both personally and in their business. So why don't we start with Dominic?
Yeah, thanks, David. Look, you talk about the human connection and being kind of real and transparent. And thank you for this opportunity to come on the call and kind of having a vulnerable moment, I guess, to kind of kick it off today as well. I think in my world, talking from a personal perspective, a month ago, when everything Corona kind of started to come to fruition, and look, I'm in the live events world, the conference world. I spent just over a decade in the kind of travel, leisure, and tourism world as well, and just seeing everything come to a screeching halt. So unlike recessions and 9/11 and things that have happened in the past, just everything stopped, right? Everything dry up for the next 30 to 60 days in the foreseeable future. And I think from a personal point of view, and I don't know if anyone can relate to this out there, but you go through almost a grieving process at the beginning that the world we once knew has potentially changed forever, and it's going to be different. And I think I went through the stages of kind of anger, right? Of it's something that's happening to us. We didn't make a bad business decision. We didn't have a bad service experience. We didn't provide a bad product. It's something that's just completely out of our control that's happening to us. And for me personally, I think it took me probably the best part of a week to kind of work through that cycle in my head of that kind of anger, grieving process before kind of that entrepreneurial business side kind of kicks in. And it's kind of, okay, this is the situation we have. I can't control the circumstances around me, but I can 100% control the way I react and I respond to them. And you start to look for the good and you start to look for the opportunity. And I know that sounds weird because there's not a whole lot of good that's happening with Corona, but you start to look for that opportunity and you start to kind of strategize on how can you utilize the time and see it as a gift within your teams as well. So I think for me personally, it's been one of the most challenging last 30 days in my professional career. But like I said, I love these conversations when we can all come together and kind of start to talk it through as well, because I think these are the stepping stones which are going to bring us closer to coming out the other side of this stronger and as a more unified unit. Because I've heard a number of people say it over the last several weeks, we is always just so much stronger than I. And I think coming together and strategizing and open up this dialogue, I know that I'm collaborating and having conversations with people that maybe historically I would have seen as a neighboring brand or maybe even potentially a competitor in the marketplace. And now those conversations have changed. So that's just a little bit for me, the last 30 days. Outside of the fun stuff of adjusting to working at home between the hours of 9 and 8 in the morning, I'm a second grade math teacher, teaching my children homeschooled. So adjusting to the new norm, and also to your point, David, at the beginning, kind of supporting and helping the teams as we all adjust as well. There's nothing normal about what's happening right now.
There's nothing normal about what's happening, but it is a time from crisis comes opportunity, which we want to make part of the theme here as well. And so we want to hear about what's going on. Rolando, what's going on? You're in Las Vegas. Tell us, has it hit? Is it real there? I mean, one of the things I've seen, what I've noticed in talking to these groups, that it's coming in waves in different places. New York is real as all get out, as we know. And so, and Washington, where I am right now, is that same. I'm not in Hawaii. I just have a nice background. People feel a little bit more calm about the situation. What's going on in your world, Rolando? And
yeah,
what you do a little bit in terms of your business as well, so people get a sense.
Sure. In Las Vegas, we're used to 1 million visitors every weekend. So the city feels kind of empty. And the convention centers, I don't know if you've seen the news, but some of the hotels and whatnot, which have been closed, their parking lots are being used for good. So that's unique. I think the general sentiment in Las Vegas is holy poop. It happened so quickly here. And I'm not sure what's going to happen later on when it comes to incoming flights from the next centers that may be hit, that maybe are further along the timeline. For example, in New Orleans, like we could see a New Orleans scenario kind of extend a little longer, and Las Vegas gets visitors from all over the world and a lot of conventions from all over the country, of course. So that's a real issue professionally, is to be able to mitigate that and what the high risk value is depending on where these groups are coming from.
How's your business doing? Is it the personal side of the
closed.
business?
We are absolutely closed. We plan on being closed for 5 months. I've furloughed my staff. I mean, we're still doing things in the background, but as far as our day-to-day operations, I even closed the warehouse because people were coming in and working on projects. I said, look, you got to be responsible about stopping this thing. Stay home and stay safe, and that's what we're trying to do.
Is that happening there in Las Vegas, though? Are people taking it seriously as all get out?
No, I would say 7 out of 10. I would say that the streets are empty. Of course, all the bars and restaurants are closed, and that's a big deal in Las Vegas. But I think a lot of businesses that are in industrial zones are still remaining open. For example, my warehouse is in an industrial zone next to the Las Vegas airport, and those parking lots are full. I see them.
Really? What are you doing personally? Are you home? Are you?
Yeah, I'm at home.
Your family's staying home, and everybody's safe, I assume.
Yeah, I have 2 little toddlers, which are no longer in the room because they would take over this camera in a second. I think on a personal note, I have elderly parents. I'm actually Canadian. I live in Canada and grew up in Canada, and they are in a place called Vancouver Island, which is outside of Vancouver, and they've been quarantined. So this became very, very real when my mother said, "I'm scared." And I said, "Mom, you're kind of safe in that part of the world, and we'll make sure that everything works out."
Well, you never know. My mother is in a Alzheimer's facility in Florida, and we got the message saying that there is a case in the Florida nursing facility. So they've completely cut out every visitor there's no way that we can have communications. And then they put all of the residents in their rooms, and they're eating all in their rooms. I mean, it
Wow.
is so serious that I hope that if anyone's listening and they're not taking it seriously, they should.
Yeah, in fact, I kind of scared people. I said, hey, you want to make sure, and I saw this from a policeman that they interviewed in Italy. I said, look, if you don't stay home, guess what? Grandma's in trouble. And I think that really hit home.
Okay.
I just want to quickly say, I know some people are having some connection issues. We are recording this, and we'll send it out afterwards. So don't worry if we're cutting out right now. You'll be able to see this. So
Wayne from the Magic Box, where we were planning on having our Los Angeles show this year. What is going on in your world? I know that you're the most organized person I know, so you've got it all figured out somehow.
First of all, I want to say, Rolando, that chair you're sitting on is awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, what can I say? First of all, I think I underestimated this when I first heard it coming into play, and for a little while I was quite in denial about it. But it has affected us in a very, very serious way. But first of all, before I talk about that, I just wanted to, I don't want to make this all glum and dark. I like to remind myself that we work in the best industry in the world, the events world, and there's nothing like it. And in my many years of doing this, there have been sort of ebbs and flows to this, and things like 9/11 or like an economy that's not doing well. We've hit rock bottom before, and we will climb out of this. It will take some time, and as I've sort of been reflecting on this, and meeting with the organization that I work with, trying to figure out what is the length of time that we're going to look at as a recovery. In my gut, it's looking like about a year to a year and a half, if that. So when this first came into play, Magic Box, and just to give you some background on Magic Box, so we're the second biggest event center in downtown LA. We got about 120,000 square feet of event space. We're a private, non-union, full service event center. So what that means, we can do everything from audio visual to labor to, literally we can do everything or we can do nothing. And the reason why I'm sharing this is that this has not just touched my immediate event team, it's had an extensive effect from IT through to AV, through to the dock, through to security. And, when it first clicked in, I saw probably the first 3 months of events shut down within 3 days. And now we're looking at 6 to 9 months worth of cancellation. So just to put this in perspective, that's zero revenue for the next 6 to 9 months. And I've still got expenses. I've still got a huge payroll. And this is a significant concern, significant. How this is going to play out, I have no idea. Fortunately, my business partners own the property we're in, so there's not going to be an eviction. And fortunately, they're also gentlemen. We've chosen to keep all of our staff, but even with that, there are some limitations. If this gets too prolonged, then obviously we're going to have to think about what we're going to do, sort of moving forward. But it's an interesting time. And
let me ask you this: what do you get up and do every day? Like, what's your to-do list look like in this kind of world? And what does everyone's to-do list like? We'll go through everybody in a minute, but how do you? I know how organized you are. How do you plan your day?
It's interesting. I'm probably working more now than I did before this happened. And the biggest part for me is obviously keeping my team engaged, and that's been the biggest challenge, because without events, how do you keep the ball moving forward? And so I've been focusing a lot on projects that have been kind of put to the side because of our regular workload, and focusing on that. So, David, as you know, we do a lot of software development, and we're in beta for a new ticketing system. We're revamping our exhibitor management tools. So I've been focusing on my guys, sort of really moving the ball forward with that. Things like development of different skill sets that we want to add to our group. Things like Vectorworks, SketchUp. So keeping them engaged is my biggest thing. And then the second part of it is strategizing how to keep myself from not going bankrupt. the first part, you're kind of thinking, once you get over the initial shock and, what you've got to do to sort of fix the problem in the short term, you start thinking about what can we create, and as an entrepreneur, these moments kind of define who you are. And for the people that are watching and listening now, how you deal with adversity in these sort of moments sort of define not only who you are as a business person or an entrepreneur, but also how you are as a human being. So, and I've been really using this time to sort of really think about, what's possible and how do we get out of this and prosper in some way.
I heard two things. Can you take us into your brain on two things? How are you communicating? We've had other of these conversations where people are doing these Zoom calls and organized how they talk to people and motivate them. And how do you manage? And then what is in your brain about how to solve the problem? How do you deal with the stress of that? And how do you compartmentalize, I guess, to deal with all this stuff? It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, communication. Zoom has been an excellent form of communication. And David, as you know, I'm a project management nut. I do everything project management with my team. My weapon of choice is Asana. My whole corporation is on it, so I'm able to track projects and interact directly with them. I'm very strategic with the way we do those things. So in these moments now, I'm even more dialed into managing the project management component, and then communication, of course, via email and then Zoom meeting is the best way. Stress.
Stress. What do you deal with the stress?
I mean, stress. I mean, I don't not feel stressed out about it. I'm concerned. I don't know if my team is feeling stressed. I've assured them that they've all got jobs, and I'm going to make sure that they do. So I haven't really been too concerned about stress. I mean, of course, if this gets too prolonged, that could all change. But right now, I'm feeling fine.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry to jump in. I think the hard part, and you hit it on the nail on the head there, is that you want to communicate to your team that you got their back. If you do, if you don't, that's okay too. Because they don't see the big picture oftentimes, right? Everyone's an expert in their field, and all of a sudden this thing comes along, and a good leader would do that. So all you leaders out there, communicate even the bad news. I mean, you can sugarcoat it a little bit, but I think everyone deserves to know the truth of how things are going.
So before we go on, let me get Vinnie involved in this conversation. Tell us what you're part of a global technology company. How are you personally, and what is going on with the team members in other parts of the world?
Yeah, we'll start with the personal piece. And I think, Dominic, you said it, that we is stronger than I. And I think Portland is really unified around that. We're seeing a lot of community support, different ways for people to get what they need, different people doing runs to grocery stores for people, or dropping off materials they have instead of letting someone go to a store and try and deal with a crowd and purchase something and risk potential infection.
But is it business as usual now there still?
No, everything, all restaurants and bars have been shut down.
Okay.
All the venues and stuff, only essential businesses. But, I think the longer that we're stuck inside, the more we start to realize that we maybe need some other things to keep us occupied. Like, I'm out of home projects to do. Like, I've done them all. There's nothing else. Like, at some point I need to get to a hardware store. Like, I need screws. Like, it has to happen. So I think that, we're starting to see ways of people getting what they need without necessarily exposing themselves to a giant crowd. And Portland itself is a fairly health conscious place. So I think that while we're not maybe the epicenter that Seattle or LA or New York is, people are taking it very, very seriously and are being very aware of themselves while they're out in public, if they are out in public. As a business, Glisser itself sort of has the opposite side of the coin, in that we've just been absolutely hammered with people looking for solutions for video conferencing, for web conferencing, for remote work and communication tools. And I think that that first 30 days, 45 days was really sort of I've been calling it a panic window of people who, this hit very quickly, and suddenly they're working from home. Their team is remote. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to host a virtual meeting. They don't know how to communicate. They don't have those project management skills that Wayne has. So they're asking, like, what do I do? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And we've been doing a lot of, I'd say, high level education on this is how you should be engaging virtually, and this is how you should be engaging your remote team. And we're starting to see more people thinking strategically now that that first sort of wave has passed, and thinking more about, how do I do this really well? How do I make sure that my team is really motivated and really engaged? And, we're not just, making sure we see each other's faces once a day.
Okay, can you answer that question for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's really about engagement, and I think it is about. I'd say I'm more connected now with my team remotely, and we have offices in New York and in London, than I was previously. But I also think that it's important that you not only connect to manage all of the business pieces and go through the task list of what everyone's working on, but there has to be that office connection that you're missing. Our marketing team has a meeting that is, we're not allowed to talk about work. We have a half an hour, we sit down, everyone catches up on, what have you been doing for the week? Like, what was your weekend like? Like, give me the summary of Tiger King, like whatever it is that you want to talk about. But it can't be work related, because we're still people and we still need to work together.
Claire, I don't know if we can do this. Can we do polls ongoing with this? Maybe you can, so that we can ask other people, are they doing the same thing? Because it would be interesting to see if other people are doing that Zoom with no business to connect more people. I would say, raise your hand. We can't see you, but the idea is, let's do, like, it seems like a lot of people are doing that. Like we're doing a lot of new innovative things that are happening. So
yeah, and David, I think at that point as well, I think we're having a lot of very real and transparent conversations with our team members that we might not have had before, right? I think one thing that I've kind of picked on right now is people really want trust and transparency from their leadership and their ownership. And yes, we want to be optimists and we want to be positive, and that's the only place I live in. I choose to be optimistic and I choose joy every single day as well. But from a transparency kind of human connection point of view, the real bottom line of it all is we don't know if this is going to be our new norm and reality for the next 60 days, the next 90 days. Like, even just in the conversation we've had so far, do you mean the difference from 5 months to 18 months plans to see kind of how we come out of the other side of this? I know from our perspective, the goal is, and it should be for everyone listening, is not to let your business become the blockbuster videos of the events world, and start to look at how you can evolve. Because one thing I know for sure, all right, there's a lot I don't know for sure when it comes down to this world, but one thing I know for sure is the world we lived in 30 days ago no longer exists. All right, when we come back, we are going to become a significantly more service-centric industry. And what I mean by that is the days of having mass buffets everywhere where people have high touch, they're not going to exist anymore. And prior to kind of coming to the live events world in Los Angeles, I spent about 10 years in the cruise industry. And we used to have something called the Norwalk virus, which people are in the hotel industry, and you guys might be familiar with it, but it's basically the second common most illness behind the common cold. But we'd have outbreaks on ships, and we'd have, 100, 150 passengers potentially get sick. But what would happen is we would suddenly go into this kind of over-service mode, where even go into a buffet, the buffet would be closed, but you'd have your server behind the buffet and they'd still walk down the line with you, but someone was serving on your behalf. So if you still wanted 12 hot dogs and 20 slices of pizza, you could still get it. So I think the opportunity for everyone on this call and everyone listening is, let's utilize this time to really strategize and kind of revolutionize and reinvent the industry. Because one thing we do know is it won't be the same, but there's still that hunger for gathering and coming together. And there's still that hunger for live events. And I think even more so now than there was before. I had a beautiful conversation before I hopped on this call today. And it's kind of that outreach for people wanting to get together. We're social animals and social creatures by nature. And I think what we need to do, and our obligation from a safety point of view, is starting to think about how we're going to make that a reality, but how we're going to do it in the new world from a safety conscious perspective. And one thing I know, listening to everybody talk on this call, is right now it's not from a lack of time of us not having the opportunity to focus on how we're going to do that. And you talk about stress and structure in our days, right? And I think it comes down to what Wayne was saying, is it's all about discipline. It's coming in each day and it's creating your to-do list, and it's working through that systematically, and it's sitting down, having those morning touch base calls with all of your team members and making sure they have their systematic to-do list to work through, and then being able to touch base with them throughout the day. And I think that removes the feeling of, did I have a good day or a bad day, or a good moment or a bad moment? It just goes down to, at the end of the day, did I achieve everything that I planned to get achieved today? Or am I behind schedule? And I think that's the world we all have to live in right now. Is this is my mission of what I want to achieve today. This is what I want to achieve over the next 30 days. And am I on track to achieve that? But,
I want to jump in right there, because not only is that a brilliant thing to say, but it's also what you should be doing in your families at home. One of the things I'm doing, I'm staying with some people because I'm stranded out of New York. And so we've created a little mini community of three people. And every morning we're having meetings to figure out what we're going to eat that day, what supplies we need. We're doing the same exact thing that we should be doing in our businesses. And we're also doing brainstorming on what we should be doing to prevent ourselves from, like going crazy and you can't just watch Netflix all day long. You have to change your life. And so businesses, we're in the most innovative period in the world in terms of our industry. I'm hearing companies that are pivoting left and right and coming up with brilliant ideas. In our last webinar, we had one of the people decided he had a fabrication company. So he decided to start making things, bookshelves for people at home, to use while they're at home. So I'd like to see what you guys are doing in real time and how you are being leaders and pivoting your companies, or at least stimulating thinking. So we can start with whoever wants to start.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump back in if people don't get sick of my voice. But I think, look, by
love the British accent. No.
Yeah, right. But by definition, the events industry, we're problem solvers, right? We always have been. That's part of the passion. That's what got us into this industry. We love to create. We love to do things out of the box. And I think for me, when you talk about kind of pivoting the business and looking for those opportunities, one thing we've started to look at, what resources do we have internally from a talent pool perspective that we can now start to offer to support the industry. And I think that's really, really powerful. So in a number of conversations I've had over the last several weeks, a number of planners, organizations, venues potentially had to cut significantly deeper than some organizations into their talent pool. And they don't have the CAD designers, the graphic designers, the space planners there anymore for when the industry starts to come back to life. And potentially they're not going to have the payroll to bring them back on board. So for us to start to look at, we used to use that talent pool internally to support our events as well. But how can we now start to pivot and offer those resources out at maybe an hourly rate, where they're paying for 5 hours, 10 hours, 40 hours of design creativity work. But it gives these companies the opportunity, when they start to see projects again, to still have the resources to execute, but without having to bring on that payroll internally as well. Because I think I'm still seeing, when you talk about business, I'm still seeing potential business opportunities for the back end of Q3 and Q4 that are starting to come in. But like I said, we're going to have to reinvent the way that we go ahead and execute those events.
Yeah, and Dominic, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, that the world of 30 days ago, it's no more. And there's no on-off switch for this, right? Like we're not going to wake up on Monday and suddenly it's going to be like, oh, well, we can host events again. Like let's go out and have a conference. And so I think that what you can do right now is really focus on understanding the virtual side of events. Because I think what will likely happen is that even when we get back to hosting live events, there may be places that can't attend those events. And there are still going to be virtual attendees. There's still going to be people who have to dial in just like we're dialing in right now. And I think that will be sort of an ebb and flow as we sort of find normalcy, maybe 18 months down the road or 2 years down the road. But right now is the opportunity that you have to learn how to do this well and learn how to communicate well virtually and engage virtually with your attendees.
Yeah, and Vinnie, just to piggyback on that, I think the world was already heading, like we were already starting to get more virtual, right? And I think that doesn't take away from the live event itself, right? Because that's always going to happen, but it complements it, right? And I think right now, a lot of people are getting exposed to the technology that might have taken 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years to get them exposed to. But I think what's going to happen is what ultimately is going to enable us to do is it's going to enable us to touch more people when we do have live events, when we do have award shows and red carpets, when we do have sporting events, because maybe that red carpet or that conference might have touched 2,000 people before. It's still going to touch those same 2,000 people who want to have a physical presence there, because we're never going to be able to remove the conversation you have with someone over breakfast, or the conversation you have whilst grabbing a glass of wine, right? Or if you're on a panel, this conversation we're all having right now, if we were doing this at a conference or a convention, we probably all would have gone for dinner together last night and had a glass of wine and spent time together. We're not going to remove that event, but what we're going to enable it to do is, rather than touching 2,000 people, that event can now potentially impact 1 million people, because you're able to bring the virtual component to it.
If you look at esports has been doing for many years now, that's exactly the model, right? You have a live event, but your real audience is tuning in. So the trick is how do you make both experiences as rich as possible?
Look, can I jump in for this? I just was interviewed on what I thought was going to be the next phase of our business. And I don't know if this is true, but I want to sort of put the hypothesis out there so people can build on it. I think we're going to be in a hub and spoke world, in that you're going to have main stages in one place for a limited number of people, but you're going to have local events all around the place with 10, 20 people. And those are going to be connected via Zoom, so that there'll be a connection. Zoom and those types of things also, we're going to get sick of them like we got sick of PowerPoint. And so Zoom is going to be the third wave when people get together after they really know each other. So you could have thousands of people in a hub and spoke format and do it either in your local city or around the country, around the world. And I think we're going to but you're going to have people still want to gather even in the local markets. So I don't know how it's going to happen exactly, but that's my hypothesis. I'd love people to start, brainstorming more on this and see if they have other ideas, because I think that this innovation piece is going to be the most important thing we have now. And we have to make sure that we are having as many ideas out there that people can test and experiment with, especially at magic boxes and things like that. So that's my thought. Any comments on that?
Well, I mean, as an event center, a shout out to one of my team members, Ruben, who actually came up with this during our team meeting this morning. We're developing a new ticketing software, and as part of that software, we're going to be adding the technology where, they're putting cameras throughout all the meeting rooms and the exhibit halls and the activation spaces and microphone systems that allow the attendee to stop into every space during a conference and listen in. And that being part of a revenue stream, not only for us, but also for our clients. So they're selling tickets not only to their conference, but also to the virtual users. So essentially wiring the whole event center so that would be possible for all of our clients.
Yeah, no, I think anyone else on the different ways to do this?
Do you remember a movie, a science fiction movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It was, I can't remember the name, but it was a game show. It was like To the Death game show. Running Man? I can't remember.
I think so.
But at that point, they had like ambassadors that would videotape specific things that you may have missed. So maybe you could plug into or pay for value add content for these people, these kind of gig economy workers coming into the event and recording things that maybe you wouldn't have experienced otherwise on a separate, smaller screen or another picture-in-picture. They showcased that in that movie very well.
Anyone else? That's really interesting. I mean, all these ideas are going to build on each other, and we're going to finally do what the science. They talked about. There's an article in the paper today that the scientists are now not thinking nationalistically, and they're just saying, "Screw it, we're just going to get together around the world and figure out what works the best."
But David, I think that goes down to the point of when and this is for everybody, right? When you're at a place in your business that you can start to move from survival mode and you can start to change that mindset into kind of reinvention mode, which we all know. To Ronaldo's point there, it's like, imagine the red carpet for the awards show in LA, and you have 2 or 3 people walking the red carpet wearing their cameras on their heads so people can be plugged in at home and having that experience, right? I think all of that stuff's going to start to come to fruition. We were already at a point where when we were designing trade show booths for conferences, we were also designing that same trade show booth digitally with VR capabilities, so people could still potentially attend that conference through a virtual portal as well. And there were touch points throughout the booth, right? So you could still walk into a booth virtually and go up to a screen and tap in. It'd play the video that's playing in the live show as well. And I think, as I'd said earlier, you're going to see a hybrid model of potentially these events still happening. And we don't know what's going to happen with domestic and international travel in the short term or the long term. And potentially when we get back to some kind of a semblance of doing events again, they might be on a domestic scale, but we might have a client in Russia or in Italy or in Australia or in Japan who wants to be present, and utilizing technology is going to give them the ability to do that. But like I said, I think more so now than ever, those two components are going to start to complement each other and actually give us an opportunity from an events perspective to touch more people and share these events and these experiences with more people. You think about a music festival or a music concert that might normally touch X amount of hundreds of thousands of people, but the ability for people to remote in from Germany or France or wherever it may be as well. So like I said, everyone who's on this call and everyone who's listening in, right now we have the time to be creative. We have the time to think outside the box. We have the time to collaborate. I've had a multitude of people within the industry reach out to me, and very similar to this, we've spent an hour on the phone just kind of brainstorming and chit-chatting, and some really good stuff has come out of it. And now we have the opportunity to dig in with our teams. But like we said before, the world that we once lived in 30 days ago isn't there anymore. So we have the pleasure, if that is the right word to be used, to reinvent what the industry is going to be, and not wait for government officials to come to us and say, these are the restrictions that we have on hotels. These are the restrictions we have. We have the obligation and the ability to make them safer, to make them more experiential, to let people enjoy that experience, but make it touch a bigger footprint, which to me, if there is an opportunity, that's the exciting piece for us all, is to invest time in that now.
I mean, there's also
that's going to come out of it.
There's also a lot of things that are happening from a technology point of view, like what Magic Leap is doing in spatial computing, where they can now actually, you can create the same experience in somebody's house, I guess, in some way, that you would have where you can actually, take your cup and turn it, and you turn your room into a screen. So there's all these things that are happening that are going to, for the right people putting it together, I think it's going to be important for our industry. There's also I think a few years ago, there was a special software program that reads people's emotions. So also when you're speaking in front of a Zoom and you understand how people are reacting to it is also going to make a big difference, because there's nothing worse than presenting and not feeling the body language. So there's going to be a lot of things that are connect people to make it feel more like face-to-face, even though it won't be face-to-face.
Yeah. I want to plug a conference that I was going to, but it got canceled. But if you want to talk about spatial computing, it's just actually right around the corner. It's called Augmented World Reality. It's in Santa Clara and Silicon Valley. AWE, if you're into that. A whole lot of VR, AR, spatial. It's nutty.
Yeah, learn it. This is the time to invest in doing your own, like getting better in technology yourself.
And I think, Dominic, you mentioned this as well, that we were moving towards this sort of like virtual hybrid event world. But I always felt like virtual was sort of an add-on to live events. Like it was always sort of like this like extra thing you could purchase if you couldn't make it. But now like we're going to have to view it as an integrated piece of the event. It's no longer an add-on. It's something that a virtual attendee is just as valuable to you as that in-person person.
Yeah, and I can tell you now. Sorry, I can tell you now, like working on projects towards the back end of the year, and still being very optimistic that they're going to happen. Already starting to build in virtual opportunities for people to have trade show booths and presences, and to have Zoom rooms, right, where people can go in and conference with people remotely and have those meetings. But like I said, I think that just enables us to touch more people and have a wider footprint. But potentially for a lot of these businesses as well, it gives them an opportunity to get more marketing dollars, because maybe rather than having 20 sponsors, whatever it may be, in 3 different levels, they can go ahead and have 10 different levels of sponsorship, and 5 of them might be in a virtual capacity as well. So I think there's such an opportunity, and virtual has really been touched on in the sporting world, starting to be touched on in the convention world. And I think for me, from an LA point of view, really starting to see how that can now be integrated into the social setting when you start to talk award shows and galas and parties and those things that happen as well. How do you start to enable people who physically might not be able to be present at those events for upwards of, 12, 24 months, whatever it may be, but to give them the experience of being able to put on their VR glasses and be at that award show. To me, that's really exciting. But as I said, I don't think it will ever remove the personal connection that Vinny, you and I would have if we were sat having lunch and chit-chatting. Like we can connect via Zoom and have this conversation. But to me, this would be, we could Zoom every 3 or 5 for 3 or 5 meetings, but every 6th meeting, I'd still want to go and have sushi and sake and catch up and get to know you, right? So I think it adds to, but it doesn't remove from that relationship piece.
I'm really interested to hear what you guys think when live events actually start getting going again. What are they going to look like now? Like, what's it going to look like in Q3 and Q4? What are those events going to look like? Is it event center? I'm struggling to answer that question.
Look, to me, my head goes to, spatial distancing, social distancing, whatever you want to go ahead and call it. I think the new reality, like to me, I was having a conversation the other day about the handshake being dead, right? Is the handshake now dead in a modern society and we're all going to go to touching feet or tapping elbows when we see each other? But I think from an event perspective as well, there's going to be that cleanliness expectation that everywhere you turn up, there's going to be hand stations for sanitization. Do you know what I mean? Every reception you go to, every red carpet you walk along, every event you're in, I don't know if we'll be at a place where people are getting their head swabs where they walked in, and if you have your temperature, you're not allowed. But like I said, I think we have the privilege and the opportunity, and something I'm enjoying doing so much with my team is already starting to add these elements to events that we're building out for the back end of the year.
I'm more interested in knowing, are they going to be big events? Are they going to be small? Or attendance numbers going to be smaller? Or are they going to be more?
I think that the in-person events may be smaller, like the capacity number, but in the long run, they actually could be bigger based on the broadcast. And then the quality of that in-person, the budgets, and this is like a crystal ball that is kind of muddy for me. The budgets could be spent on the kind of the sets, if you will, the interior sets, to make those as pristine or as messy as you want them to be, because that's the messaging that you want, because there's going to be a lot of panning and zooming and a lot of camera work done, and it's going to be like a television set, if you will.
I mean, that trend started coming maybe about a year or so ago, where it was less about the sort of trade show conference and more about the activation or experiential marketing. So, I mean, most of my clients now fit the experiential marketing side, so they're investing a lot in set designs and build outs and about the experience. But I'm really curious. I mean, and with the younger generation, if we looked at the Coachella, be coming in October, I'm assuming that those numbers will go right back to where they were. That age group will bounce back. I'm more curious to see.
I'll tell you what, I've been asked this question a bunch, and I know nothing more than anyone else, but I think it's going to be a slow burn to get people to feel comfortable traveling and being in large groups. Do you want your family to go out and put anyone at risk? No one wants to be at risk. So it's going to be a slower burn. I think that we're now, a lot of people are saying, wait till October, September for their events. Even though we hear China, some stuff is coming on board in April or May, which has been a few months already. So I think it's more sober. The next 2 weeks are going to be really hard to make a judgment because it's going to be so bad. And so we can't almost even do that. It's just so hard for what's going on in New York City right now. And if that's the harbinger of what's going to happen, we have to really think about it. Claire, do we have questions? I want to make sure that we have time for questions.
Yeah. There are a few in the chat that seem to relate to what we were talking about. One question: how do you drive attendance and engagement for virtual events, which naturally have a higher drop-off rate? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can chime in there. I think that it is really less about the presentation and more about the conversation. And it's about finding ways to engage your audience and get their feedback to make them feel like they are in the room and that they have a voice in what's being said and what's being shown to them. And I think you do that through things like the Q&A feature that we have on this exact call, we can do things like polling. Any sort of additional information, I think, is also a great way. Like the follow-up is super important. The extra information that you're passing along after, I think, can be a huge add.
With that said, do you think that, the big thing I worry about in our business is that at conferences especially is the forgetting curve. When you hear something, we forget it immediately. Using technology to reinforce things may be another sort of solution to create more engagement.
Yeah, you're battling the tune out even more, I think, in a virtual world. I mean, it's so much easier for me to open a tab and look at my email when I have to be on my laptop versus, hiding my phone underneath my conference chair. So I think the more that you can keep them engaged and keep them active, the better.
And that's no joke. That I think is really serious. Once we get, we're over the Zoom phenomenon thing. We're gonna be cleaning our desks if we have desks and doing other things. Rolando, do you have a comment? Who wants to go on this question?
What was? Can you repeat the question?
Oh, Claire can do that.
Yeah, it was, how do you drive attendance and engagement for virtual events?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the people who are doing that kind of work now, with Twitch and everything, it's all about influencers and a long marketing lead time for something like this. And you better make sure there's value add on your post event, because that's when all the good stuff comes in, because then you have time to do special effects or whatever, because it's not live. But I think that the influencer economy is going to be strong on this one, I think.
That's a really good point. Claire, more questions?
Yeah. How do you see re-envisioning traditional engagement points like tastings, linen rental selection, all those things we're so used to?
Who wants that? Dominic?
I'm happy to talk to that. I think when it comes down to tastings, linen, one thing I'm already working on with the teams is kind of putting together those SOPs, right? So what it looks like from a cleanliness perspective when someone comes into your showroom, so that you're wiping things down and cleaning and spraying and Viroxing when we're picking up equipment from events, what our internal processes are going to look like as well. I think from a tasting perspective as well, like I said, we're going to go back. I envision us going back to much more of like that service-centric industry, where it's less of if you're at a tasting, you're going up and grabbing things yourself, and much more of a chef serving each other, as they do from kind of a high-end perspective anyway, going and serving the individual pieces to the people who are there as well. So I see those things coming back almost to a normal perspective as well. But like I said, I just think how we interact as human beings is going to change. Now, not to go too off topic, but if you told me before 9/11 that when I went through an airport, I'd be putting my toiletries into a little Ziploc bag and taking off my shoes and taking my laptop out, I wouldn't have thought. I'd be like, no one's going to travel if we have to do that stuff as well. I think how those things are done is just going to change and evolve, that a few years from now, we'll look back and we won't remember it being any different. We'll be like, what, we used to be able to go to buffets and tastings, and we used to be able to go up and just select those things ourselves. No, now you'll go and you'll probably sit behind potentially a screen, and a chef will come out and place them on your plate. It's just going to become the new norm for us. But I don't think any of those activities are going to go away.
So Dominic, that brings up a good point that with F&B, they're the workhorse of our industry.
Yep.
They're the ones that are smaller margins in many cases and do hundreds of events a week. And I'm hearing that the catering world is getting killed. I mean, literally, it is hard to come out from under. How will F&B change? But probably Wayne has some good points on this, and whoever wants to jump in.
I don't do F&B. I've particularly stayed out of that business for the things that you've just brought up right now, but I'm aware of the different vendors that I work with now are probably not going to make it through this.
So do you think that there's going to be a whole new wave of opportunity and people that are going to probably go out of business?
Yeah, and I'll talk to that from back in kind of my hospitality days, right? I think, like I said, we'll go back to that service-centric business model, and we talk about experiential, right? It's been the buzzword that's been thrown around for a long time now as well. And I think from restaurants and venues, it's finding a way to build that experience in. So potentially they have the ability to charge things at a higher price point, so they can go ahead and cover the payroll that will come along with the additional staff that would be needed from a service point of view. But I think you might find in restaurants when they start to reopen, them kind of embracing that experiential side of things and actually taking the service side of things and making it something that you're happy to pay for. So maybe you'd normally go and buy your $20 steak, but you're happy to go pay 45 or 105 at a different venue, because when you walk in, you have a whole different service experience. So I think we're talking about reinventing the live events world as well. I think from an F&B perspective as well, they have the same challenge, right? They have the same challenge that they need to go ahead and reinvent the experience of someone who's going into a restaurant. So potentially a meal that I was willing to pay $150 for before, I'm now potentially paying 180 or 200, but they need to create the value and the desire for us to go ahead and do it. So I think the same reinvention that we're going through, F&B need to kind of have their clock spinning, because anyone who thinks that at the end of this, they're going to be able to reopen the all-you-can-eat pizza parlor is probably, misled, because I just don't think those things are going to come back in that capacity.
I've got an F&B story for you. So during the Great Recession, I had moved from Montreal to Las Vegas. And nobody was purchasing entertainment, the kind of work that we did at the time. And we looked at spreadsheets, and the F&B spreadsheet during the Great Recession was still there. It was smaller, but the entertainment portion and AV and all that stuff was zero. So we're like, how do we switch columns from the decor entertainment side into the F&B side? And that's where a large part of our pivot came from, to make more food and beverage characters and experiential things. So that's going to happen again, I think, for the F&B professionals. You're seeing that already in Vegas pre-coronavirus, right? The dinner clubs are back, and they're much more expensive than they used to be, because you're not really there for the food. And if you are there for the food, it's also very good food. So I think that's already happening. I think that's to the point is that the experience is going to be enhanced, but it's going to be more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on that? Claire, you want to get through any more questions here?
Yeah. From a contractual perspective, what are you seeing from your clients in terms of force majeure protections? If anybody feels comfortable speaking to that, revising your contracts.
I'm happy to jump in on that one. And I think one stance that we kind of took from the very beginning of this is really dealing with each partnership and each relationship on a case-by-case basis. I think it's really hard to paint topics like this with kind of a broad stroke, because it differentiates for the client, the venue, and the timing as well. So the piece I'd say on that for everyone is kind of, even when it comes down to cancellation policies and things like that, right? Going forward for the next 6 months, if someone was to book something for October, November, September, whatever it may be, and this is still continuing in its current capacity with its current restrictions, but we are, as an organization, having those kind of personalized one-on-one conversations with our partners and our clients, and we're putting together potentially agreements on a case-by-case basis that work and make sense and make both parties feel extremely comfortable. So I think on that topic, kind of the short answer to it, it's really hard to make a sweeping policy. I think based on the relationships we have, it's really conversations that you have to have with those individual clients to just say, hey, does this work for you? Does it make sense? Does it create a win-win? And then once you've agreed, you kind of sign on the dotted line and move forward.
You mean
to add to that, I'll tell you what I'm doing. You know, obviously, I have a bunch of contracts for people who are producing events, and obviously, I can enforce it if I wanted to, but we don't want to be a jerk about it. And what I've been doing is allowing my clients to either postpone or cancel and move everything they've paid from that point on to another date. So I'm trying to accommodate all my clients as best as I can. I don't know what the new contracts will look like. In fact, I had a client ask me for a contract for December, but they wanted to write a clause in there that they can cancel and get all their money back at any time. And it's a tough question for me to answer. You know, I simply responded, well, you got to do what's right for your business, but if you're going to sign a contract, I expect you to honor that. And if you're not ready to do that, then let's just wait till you get to that point where you feel comfortable about it, because at the same time, I mean, I've got to keep my business going as well. So I can't have people sign contracts that give them an open end just to walk away from it whenever they feel like it. It's an interesting time. We're defining this as we go along.
Wayne, how do you deal with the contract issue of it's a force majeure issue that I'm hearing legally, that in order to have that happen, you have to give back all the money and stuff. The contract was null and void, but you're already spending money, and many people are living on deposits.
Right.
It puts a lot of people at risk. What do you say to that? It's just such a hard position,
I mean,
especially small entrepreneurs.
technically, the way our contract is written, I mean, I can enforce the contract. The coronavirus, it doesn't come under force majeure. But like I said, I mean, if I did that to everybody, I wouldn't have a business tomorrow. So I'm applying everything they paid and allow them to go to a date in advance to continue that. I mean, that's the best I can do. I mean, there's no other way to. I mean, obviously, you want to help these people out as much as possible. At the same time, I've got to also try to keep my business afloat.
Any other comments?
I think the important part, I recently had a conversation with my lawyer about this. I said, look, we need to really tighten these things up, and there's always exceptions that you can make. But I think a lot of people don't even read their contracts. So I said, whatever you do, make this very, very clear, and make it an important part, because if anything we're going to enforce anything in our contract, it's going to be this one. So I would say, write what you want to write and be willing to enforce it, but both parties really have to be aware of that. There is no I didn't really read that part. You'll be amazed how many people just sign without even looking at it.
Yeah, I think what Dominic said was very important. It's a get together with your client and figure out what makes sense for both of you. Similar to what I said to my client, it's a business decision for you to decide on. And what Dominic said made all the sense in the world to me.
Before we end, we're close to the end. I want to end on a serious note and ask you the question of, what advice do you give to people who get sick that work for you? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you react? I know you have got to be empathetic and all that, but it has serious consequences everywhere. Anybody have experience in that?
I think I'd say, I haven't had to experience that yet, especially when it comes down to someone within my team having corona or being diagnosed with it. What I would say to you, I think now that everyone's working remotely, my entire team, outside of myself, who go into, I was joking before this call, I go into the office once a week to pick up the mail and water the plants. But outside of that, we're all working remotely. So outside of if someone was to get sick, offering them the support that they need, making sure they have everything that they need from a food and a supplies perspective as well. We obviously don't have the ability to go there and see them. And depending on the severity of kind of how sick they are, kind of dictates on if they're able to continue to perform their duties or not. But obviously giving them the sick leave and the time that they need to go ahead and recover is the most important from a human potential as well. And I think one thing that I've always learned, especially about this industry, and this is just work in general, right? We spend more time with our colleagues and the people we work with than we do in most cases with our own family. Outside of the last month. The last month is an exception to that rule, because I've spent way more time with my kids and family than I have with my work colleagues outside of digitally. But you love your team and they become those family members. So if someone gets sick, you tend to move to the mindset of focusing on them recovering and getting better, and that human element, before you start to think about the kind of work side of things and the work implications, especially with what's going on in the world right now. Do you mean more so than ever? Back in the day, if someone had a common cold or they were sick, do you mean you give them a call and you let them take their sick time? I think now, if someone was diagnosed with corona, my initial reaction would just be to make sure that they recover and they have everything they need to recover accordingly.
Teams rally around each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have comments on that, or else we'll go to final comments in a second?
I think the important part here is to remember is that if someone does get sick and it's just like someone on your team who is diagnosed with cancer, it's survivable. We have someone in our office that survived cancer, and we supported them every step of the way. It was a long journey, and I think the coronavirus is going to be a long journey for that individual. So they need the help that maybe their families maybe not be giving them. So to the point that was raised, that we are the family that has to help out in the long term. It's not just the first week and then you see you later. It's a long-term thing.
And everyone take 1 minute or 30 seconds and give us a final comment. We're going to be doing this over and over again. We think that this is a big hug to our industry, as well as the support system, as well as a place that every one of the people on this call are willing to take calls from other people to give advice on what they have learned. So who else wants to go?
I'll go first. I'll give my 30 seconds first. I think that it's important to, I encourage you to not be discouraged. And that I think we're living in a very unknown, dark time, but we have time on our side finally to learn new things, to innovate, to find other ways to experience conferences and parties and events and this industry. And now's the time to do it. So take some time and put some brain power behind that.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback Vinnie there as well. So don't come out the other side of Corona and wish you had done something, right? We have the time now. Learn something, read something, go ahead and do something educationally, and encourage your team to do that as well. All right. There's so many projects and so many wish I had the time that I've probably said in my life professionally. So utilizing your warehouse teams or your field teams to go ahead and do additional OSHA training, or go ahead and do additional Six Sigma training, or go ahead and advance themselves from an educational perspective as well. Go ahead and use this time wisely, because I have a feeling when the faucet gets turned back on, we're not going to have that time of day again, because we're all going to be back to working 16 to 20-hour days to put on and execute these events. And I guess the closing statement from me, as cheesy as it sounds, is don't hold on to the past, because the future has the potential to be better. So like I said, the world we lived in 30 days ago is gone. So let's focus on making the new live events world even better than it ever was before.
Rolando?
Yeah, my comment it would be, get out of your comfort zone, everybody. If you're too comfortable doing this, this is not a vacation. You need to learn something new. And if the people around you are not pushing you, get on to a group on the World Wide Web that is. There's a lot of people doing exciting work all over the world. Get out of your comfort zone, because when it comes back, it's gonna be quite a race. Who learned something and who did it?
Claire, that's a great line. Claire,
Yeah, Wayne, did you want to add anything?
Oh, Wayne, I'm sorry, Wayne, I didn't see you.
Well, I mean, first of all your answers were awesome. So I'm going to play a little bit more of a pragmatic role in this. I was in denial when this first came in, and now that it's in full swing, I just wanted to add that, the recovery is not going to be swift. So keep an eye on the hard decisions that you have to make now to be able to survive this. And also use this time to figure out what those things are. And in my case, it's obviously cutting back expenses significantly. So whatever that is for you, figure out how to get through the short-term issues that are occurring right now, and then start keeping an eye on when things resume.
Claire? Sorry.
Yeah, I would just say, on behalf of BizBash Editorial, tell us your stories. We want to do stuff like this. We want to be sharing everybody's stories, how everybody's pivoting, how everybody's staying inspired, what people are using this time to learn. So email us anytime at tips@bizbash.com and let us know what we're not covering that you want to hear about. We're open to anything and everything right now. So thank you guys so much for doing this. David, do you want to end it off?
Yeah, I'll close it out. To piggyback on what Claire said, we want to be the feedback loop for the industry. We think that's what we can do really now. And we think that it's important for us to share what we're hearing. The purpose of these interviews is to be a public brainstorming so that you can do this in your own companies. And that the idea of building your intellectual capital so that you're not spending the time when you're drinking from the fire hose trying to be innovative seems like one of the key lessons I'm hearing from today. And also, I've been studying. I'm a big Outward Bound person, and years ago, and we've been studying Shackleton. The guy that was in the Antarctic and had to take his whole crew. And one of the precepts that he put in his survival techniques was to celebrate everything. And so even during the times that we're having, we have to celebrate any success we have, because in order to keep our people motivated, celebrating everything is part of what our business is about. And that's gets the world moving when we celebrate things. So the idea that the event industry will ever go away will not happen, because we are about celebration in many cases. So with that said, thank you all for coming. Tune in on a regular basis. We want to help. We want to hear from you, and send this to as many people as you can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.